Ever get that feeling like you just got to dig deeper, like there's more to uncover? Well, that's kind of what we're doing today, peeling back the layers on this whole law of one thing, especially those introductions from LL research. It's fascinating stuff, really. We're going to unpack how it all began, like where this whole extraterrestrial communication thing came from and what they were even aiming for in the first place.
What gets me is how this whole thing evolved, It wasn't just like boom out of nowhere, but like a whole 19 years of research starting back in 62, eventually hitting that big moment with the wreck contact in 81. This introduction to book I we're looking at, that's right at the start of that later, more intense phase.
You can tell right away that Don Elkins approached this with a scientist's mind. His deal was all about giving you the data so you could make up your own mind, no pressure. And he was seriously cautious about all the paranormal stuff, knew there were a lot of fakes out there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful in that territory. So many wild claims floating around. Elkins was like, here's the raw data, you decide. It's a pretty solid scientific approach, even though the topic itself is pushing the boundaries of what science usually tackles.
One thing that really struck me was Elkins' belief that, what science knows now, it's not the whole picture. He thought our current view of the natural world is just one tiny piece of a much bigger reality that's still out there, waiting to be discovered. He really hoped that their research could help us understand more of that bigger picture. Think about it. After going through millions of words of supposed extraterrestrial communication, he decided that the raw material was the most valuable information he had ever found. It's got to tell you something about how much it affected him.
It really does. I mean, he was willing to question the established scientific paradigms, right?
Yeah.
And explore unconventional sources of information. That's crucial to understanding his motivation. The sheer volume of material he went through speaks to a deep and persistent search for truth.
To connect with Ra, they created a method called tuned trance telepathy. Now, according to Ra, they've got a history with Earth. Landed here about 11,000 years ago, extraterrestrial missionaries trying to help us evolve mentally. Things didn't quite go as planned, so they backed off, but kept an eye on things, which they claim is why they know so much about our history and languages. Pretty wild, right?
It is. Ra's account brings up this idea of extraterrestrials being involved with Earth for a very long time. You see that theme pop up in all sorts of contactee stories. And this whole idea of them stepping back but still watching, it kind of echoes certain interpretations of the UFO phenomenon, like there's this ongoing interaction, even if it's not always so obvious.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Ra describes himself as a sixth-density social memory complex. Now, we're considered to be at the tail end of our third density cycle. That puts Ra about 3 evolutionary cycles ahead of us, which could be millions of years. Trying to wrap your head around that kind of timescale, it's mind-blowing, honestly. And with such a huge difference in evolution, well, you can imagine how tricky communication would be.
Absolutely. That massive evolutionary gap explains why conveying concepts and nuances would be so difficult between beings at such vastly different stages of development. Imagine trying to explain quantum physics to, I don't know, an ant colony. Our language, our concepts, they just wouldn't be adequate.
By the time they were writing this intro to Book I, they'd already conducted over 100 sessions with Ra, clocking in at about 300,000 words. Don thought all this pointed towards the possibility of a much broader scientific paradigm, one that could include this kind of communication.
It's a remarkable amount of data, regardless of your personal beliefs about where it came from. The fact that they generated this much coherent material through this process is a phenomenon in itself, right? Elkins saw it as a potential catalyst for expanding our scientific understanding. Maybe the answers to some of our biggest questions lie beyond our current scientific methods.
The story then shifts to Carla Rueckert and how she joined Don's research back in '62. She was intrigued by him, college professor and psychic researcher who'd already done over 200 hypnotic age regressions. Not your everyday combo.
It does speak to the broad range of their early investigations, doesn't it? Elkins didn't limit himself to traditional academic stuff. He was actively exploring things that were considered fringe science at best. And Rueckert's interest shows you how compelling that kind of unconventional inquiry can be, especially the potential of reincarnation research.
One of the first experiments Carla got involved with was with some engineering students. They were trying to make telepathic contact based on info supposedly received from extraterrestrials by a group in Detroit. They even had instructions on how to communicate without any physical means. Sounds kind of cloak and dagger, doesn't it?
Definitely has that mysterious vibe. It reflects those early efforts to figure out communication protocols based on what other contactees had reported. This focus on non-physical methods is consistent with a lot of those accounts, this idea of telepathic communication being key. It was like a direct attempt to replicate and build on those claims.
Well, the results were not what you'd expect. Everyone in the group except Carla started making these strange noises during meditation. She actually admitted that for the first 6 months, her biggest challenge was not bursting out laughing at this raucous symphony of guttural clicks, slurps, and tongue flops. Gotta love a little humor in serious research, right?
It's a good reminder that even when you're dealing with extraordinary stuff, the ordinary, even the funny, can show up. Rueckert's reaction shows how new and maybe even absurd those early attempts felt, compared to the profound nature of the Ross contact later on.
Things took a turn when a contactee from that Detroit group paid them a visit. This person basically told them to just let their thoughts flow freely and worry about analyzing it all later. That shift in approach seemed to be the key. Within a month, half the group was getting information, and within a year, everyone but Carla was receiving transmissions. At first, though, it was slow and cautious. They're really afraid of messing up.
Yeah, that Detroit contactee's advice was crucial. It highlights how important mindset is, especially letting go of that self-censorship. The group's initial hesitation makes sense. They wanted to be accurate. But the instruction to prioritize unfiltered expression turned out to be a game changer.
Carla ended up joining Dawn full-time in 1970. What drove her was this deep belief that researching extraterrestrial contact was essential for understanding, the big mysteries of existence. That's dedication to an unconventional path.
No doubt about it. It speaks to a deep personal quest for meaning. She felt traditional ways of seeking answers just wouldn't cut it. To commit yourself to a field that's so often ridiculed, you got to have a strong inner conviction and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
Before the RAC contact became the main focus, Don was also digging into this whole UFO materialization and dematerialization thing. He even attended seances with a spiritualist minister in Toledo, Reverend James Tingley, looking for connections. They witnessed a solid-looking ghost called Sister and an entity called Master, who apparently touched them physically and then passed right through them. Hard to even imagine, right?
Elkins was searching for tangible examples of matter defying the laws of physics, basically. The phenomena they reported witnessing, like these materialized spirits physically interacting with their environment and seeming to have no density, would have been really compelling evidence for him.
Carly even talked about how her gullibility might have actually been helpful in paranormal research. She felt it led to a kind of personal certainty, even if it wasn't the kind of hard, reproducible proof that science demands. She connected this to the idea of spiritual evolution that Rod talks about later. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Maybe being willing to believe, at least at first, can open up ways of understanding that strict skepticism might shut down.
It's a good point. There's this tension between objective scientific validation and subjective experience in paranormal research. Rueckert's openness allowed her to experience things that a more skeptical person might have just dismissed. Maybe that led to a different type of insight, something more aligned with a spiritual perspective.
In '74, Don decided Carla should be more of a dedicated channel. That led to daily intensive meditation and a bunch of new telepathic receivers popping up in the group. They recorded all these sessions, which eventually became an unpublished manuscript called Voices of the Gods. Sounds like they were building a substantial body of work on this stuff.
Definitely. It was a deliberate move to ramp up their channeling efforts. The daily meditation, the new receivers, it shows a more structured, committed approach to making contact. And that Voices of the Gods manuscript, that's a major milestone in their research, a collection of their early findings.
Here's a wild coincidence. In that same year, '74, Andrija Puharich published his book, URI. It detailed his contact with extraterrestrial intelligences, levitating objects and messages on a cassette recorder. The similarities between those messages and what LL research had found were numerous. Even eerie stuff, like real people in Puharich's story, matching up with fictional characters in their unpublished manuscript, The Crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater. They even met Puharich, and get this, his house was a dead ringer for the one described in their book. There's a lot of unlikely coincidences, right?
Talk about synchronicity. It suggests there might be some underlying pattern, some connection between these different contact experiences. The fact that independent research efforts were turning up similar things, it adds a bit of weight to the phenomena, even if we don't have a clear explanation. And that house thing is especially striking, like there's a deeper resonance at play.
So that leads to why they wrote these introductions to the Law of One, to give you the background and the right mindset. to understand the raw material. They knew the raw contact didn't just come out of thin air. It came from years of research and experiments with these supposed extraterrestrial beings. It's like setting the stage before the main act.
Exactly. They understood that context was important. The raw material wasn't just a standalone thing, it was the culmination of their work. The introduction helps you navigate the often unconventional ideas that Ra presents.
Right off the bat, they acknowledge how strange this whole UFO thing is. They even mentioned Dr. J. Allen Hynek's concept of high strangeness, pointing out that even experienced researchers struggle to fully grasp it. Yet a big chunk of the public believes in UFOs. It's this weird gap between scientific uncertainty and public conviction.
High strangeness is a good way to put it. UFO phenomena can be so slippery and paradoxical. And even though there's no solid scientific consensus, a lot of people believe, it points to our deep curiosity and maybe an intuition that there's more out there than what science currently accepts.
They talk about some common experiences that people who claim UFO encounters report. Missing time, irritated eyes, skin problems, personality changes, even needing counseling. They mentioned Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle working with these individuals. It's not just anecdotal stuff. It suggests there might be significant lasting effects on those who have these encounters.
It's definitely something that needs more investigation. The consistency of certain symptoms across different cases suggests that there could be real physiological and psychological impacts that mainstream science hasn't figured out yet.
They bring up the Betty and Barney Hill case, which is well known, of course. Psychiatric therapy and regressive hypnosis supposedly revealed their abduction and examination on a UFO. It's a case that's really become part of our culture, shaping how we view alien abduction.
The Betty and Barney Hill case is like a cornerstone of the whole abduction phenomenon. The details that came out through hypnosis, although they're debated, they've had a huge influence on how people view these claims. It shows how psychological techniques can be used to explore these subjective experiences.
They also talk about a more recent case from January '77. Young truck driver sees a big, bright object, loses a chunk of time, ends up with bloodshot eyes. Under hypnosis, he remembers being inside the craft, seeing these non-human machines, having a physical exam, and then being returned to his truck. This account even made it into several UFO journals. Just shows that these reports kept popping up during their research.
And this later case just reinforces those recurring themes in Close Encounter reports, doesn't it? The unusual craft, the physical effects, the time distortion, the memories of being on board, often recovered through hypnosis. It got published in UFO journals, so it was definitely considered important within the UFO community.
They point out how telepathic communication comes up a lot in these Close Encounter reports, even though there's no definitive scientific proof for telepathy in general. Don even claimed to have done successful telepathic experiments with Uri Geller, though not in a rigorously controlled setting. LL Research itself had weekly meetings open to anyone interested, acknowledging they couldn't prove extraterrestrial telepathy, but pointing to the sheer amount of alleged evidence they'd collected.
It's fascinating, these recurring reports of telepathy. It suggests a way of communicating that goes beyond words, right? Elkins' experiments with Uri Geller, even if they weren't scientifically validated, show his personal interest in these psychic phenomena. And the LL research meetings demonstrate their openness to discussing these things and sharing anecdotal evidence, even if they didn't have scientific proof.
They even connect UFOs with this whole metal bending thing, referencing Rhee's idea of action at a distance as a function of the mind, along with Uri Geller's demonstrations, of course. They mentioned the increasing number of kids supposedly doing this, which Professor John Taylor documented in his book Superminds. He even did controlled experiments with objects sealed in glass. They hint that the ray material explains this connection. It's mind-boggling to think how these seemingly unrelated things might be linked through the power of the mind.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept, this link between UFOs and psychokinesis, the idea that the mind can affect physical reality. The reports of kids bending metal, especially in controlled experiments, provide compelling evidence, even though it's still controversial. The ray material might offer a unique way to understand what's going on here, how these separate occurrences are connected.
Switching gears a bit, they bring up Don's perspective on paranormal events, introducing concepts from occult theory, like the idea of different planes of existence. He talks about this spiritual progression through reincarnation until you develop enough to access higher planes. All these planes exist alongside our physical space, with limited awareness of each other, like different channels on a TV. He makes it clear that our reality isn't the only one, or even the final one.
Elkins' exploration of occult theory gives us a possible way to understand these paranormal events, where UFOs and materialized spirits might be coming from. This idea of interpenetrating realities could explain why these things appear and disappear from our physical perception. Maybe they exist at a different vibration or dimension. That TV channel analogy helps visualize how these different dimensions can coexist without us being aware of them.
To drive home the point that our scientific understanding is limited, they use the analogy of an atom structure. A tiny nucleus in this vast space, like a pea in a football stadium. They're pointing out how little actual matter there is in what we think of as solid objects. They say that science is mostly about predicting things, not explaining them completely. Newton's law of F&A is a good example, a useful model, but not the whole story. Then they touch on Einstein's theory of relativity and the sheer scale of the cosmos. They even question whether the speed of light is really constant, considering new theories. It really makes you realize how primitive our scientific grasp might be compared to the immensity of the universe.
That section is a good reality check, reminding us that our current models might not be telling us everything about reality. That atom analogy really drives home how much emptiness there is in matter. The discussion of Newton and Einstein shows how scientific understanding is always evolving. Even established laws can be refined or even replaced as we learn more. Questioning fundamental constants like the speed of light further emphasizes how much we still don't know.
Then they get into this long-standing problem in physics, action at a distance, like gravity and electrostatic interaction. They point out how the math describing these seemingly different phenomena is similar. They bring up Einstein's lifelong search for a unified field theory and Dewey B. Larson's six-dimensional unified field theory, which aimed to calculate any physical value. This quest for a single underlying principle is a big deal in theoretical physics.
It is. Understanding action at a distance has always been a puzzle. The fact that the math is so similar for different forces suggested to Einstein and others that there's an underlying unity we haven't uncovered yet. Larson's theory, which includes coordinate time as a key element, offered a radical new way to approach this, suggesting a deeper interconnectedness within space-time itself.
And this ties back to information supposedly received from contactees even before Larson's work. They talked about the need for more dimensions, the idea that light doesn't travel but simply is, and the concept that consciousness creates vibration, which is what we perceive as light. They link this back to Larson's theory, and the contactees claim that UFOs can lower their vibration. It's fascinating how these different unconventional sources seem to converge.
The parallels between what the contactees were saying and Larson's physics are striking. The fact that similar concepts popped up independently, one from supposed extraterrestrial communication and the other from mathematical deduction, suggests a possible overlap in how we understand fundamental principles. The idea of consciousness creating vibration and UFOs manipulating their vibrational state offers a unique perspective on the nature of reality and how these phenomena operate within it.
They highlight how the contactees emphasize the simplicity and unity of creation, which they say Larson's theory represents mathematically. They even provide contact info for the International Society of Unified Science. It shows that they were looking for ways to connect these different ways of understanding the universe and maybe even find scientific backing for the contactee information.
It does. By pointing to Larson's work and the society dedicated to his theories, they were trying to find a more rigorous framework for interpreting the contactee information. This focus on the underlying unity of creation resonates with a lot of spiritual and philosophical traditions. The suggestion that Larson's theory supports this idea mathematically is a pretty big claim within their overall framework.
They then circle back to the increasing reports of action at a distance seemingly caused by mental activity, like those jello-rising children. They propose that the 1980s might see magic becoming more common, even making its way into university science courses, since we don't really have good explanations for these things. It's a bold prediction, based on these observations that are challenging conventional science.
If these psychokinetic abilities, especially in kids, keep being documented, it could force science to reconsider its current models. Imagine magic being studied in universities. That would be a major paradigm shift in how we understand and study these abilities.
Next, they move on to Carla's discussion of the immortality of individual consciousness. They connect this to ancient mystical traditions, St. Paul's distinction between physical and spiritual bodies, and the Egyptian concept of the Ka. This introduces a core belief that pops up a lot in contactee messages and spiritual teachings.
The idea of consciousness surviving after death is a cornerstone of many spiritual and philosophical traditions. By referencing established traditions, like those of St. Paul in ancient Egypt, they're putting this idea into historical context. It suggests that humans have long intuited that the self endures beyond the physical body.
They touch on the idea of life before birth, too, pointing to how siblings often have such different personalities and how kids sometimes have unexplained fears or talents. This leads into the concept of reincarnation, which they emphasize as a crucial element in the UFO contact messages. Reincarnation, they suggest, drives humanity's physical and metaphysical evolution through all sorts of experiences across multiple lifetimes. They acknowledge that this concept isn't very familiar in Judeo-Christian cultures, even though Don had early hints that it might be true.
The observations about siblings and kids with inexplicable traits do lend some support to the idea of pre-existence and consciousness continuing across lifetimes. The way they present reincarnation in the context of contactee messages, it provides a framework for understanding why we have such diverse experiences in life and how the soul evolves over many incarnations. They acknowledge that it's not a common idea in Western thought, highlighting a difference between this philosophy and mainstream Western religion.
They tell this story about a young boy with terrible allergies who, under hypnosis, recalled a past life as a solitary gardener in England. His higher self supposedly confirmed that the lesson he learned in that life was to prioritize people. After that, his allergies got better when he was exposed to pollen. It's a powerful story, though it's hard to prove scientifically. It links past life experiences to present-day conditions and healing.
It's a great example of karma as a learning process that stretches across lifetimes. The apparent connection between the past life memory, the lesson learned, and the allergy disappearing makes for a compelling story. It suggests a link between consciousness and physical health, even if science can't easily explain it.
They then talk about our relationship with the universe and introduce this idea of a magical personality. They're not talking about illusions or tricks. Magic, in this context, means the art of causing changes in consciousness at will. They explain how strengthening this inner personality through self-reflection, taking responsibility for your experiences, analyzing your reactions, and trying to find balanced responses can lead to actions that come from within and are more in tune with the natural evolution of the universe. It's about developing self-mastery and inner alignment.
This idea of magic being about consciously directing your own consciousness aligns with a lot of esoteric and mystical traditions. They're saying that doing inner work, self-reflection, taking responsibility, finding emotional balance, helps you align with the natural flow of the universe and consciously influence your own state of being and experiences.
This idea then connects to the purpose of UFOs. They suggest that UFOs have been around for thousands of years, even mentioning references in old texts like the Bible. They trace modern interest in UFOs from Kenneth Arnold's sighting in '47 to the Mantell incident in '48, which sadly involved a pilot from Don Elkins' own flying school who died while checking out a UFO. They emphasize how much puzzling evidence there is about UFO sightings, including radar data and physical traces left behind.
Putting the UFO phenomenon into a larger historical context, drawing on both ancient texts and modern sightings, suggests that there's been a long-standing interaction with Earth, maybe still going on. The Mantell case, especially with the pilot's death and his reported observations, is a powerful example of the mystery and potential dangers involved. The radar data and physical traces add weight to the idea that this is a real phenomenon, not just misinterpretations.
They even mention this computer program called UFOCAT, which has data on over 80,000 reported UFO sightings and can apparently predict UFO characteristics based on physical traces from landings. That's a detail that suggests there might be some underlying patterns and consistency in all those reports, that it's not just random stuff happening.
The UFOCAT program highlights how systematically analyzing the data could reveal patterns and trends in all those UFO reports. The idea that it can predict UFO characteristics based on physical evidence suggests a degree of order and predictability that deserves more scientific attention.
Circling back to the raw material, they describe it as transcripts of very precise communications dealing with metaphysics, philosophy, and this whole grand plan of physical and spiritual evolution. They introduced this entity called Haton, who claims that some UFOs are here to help countries hit by disasters or poverty, pure service to others. Haton talks about contacting Earth periodically throughout history, saying that now is especially important for wider contact because humanity's understanding and desire for it have increased. They explain that this contact is self-generating, driven by shared information and the raising of vibrational frequencies through thought, group work, and meditation.
Hayton offers a specific perspective on why some UFOs might be here, a benevolent intent to help us evolve and alleviate suffering. The idea that we're at a crucial time for wider contact because of our increasing awareness aligns with a lot of New Age thought. And the concept of contact being self-generating through shared information and higher consciousness emphasizes that we play an active role in this potential interaction.
Hayden, speaking for the Confederation of Planets, expresses regret that they can't directly teach us. Doing so would violate the free will of those who don't want their help. They say that true understanding has to come from within, with the Confederation only offering guidance to encourage us to seek the Creator. This principle of non-interference is a big deal in a lot of accounts of benevolent extraterrestrial contact.
Non-interference and respect for free will are consistently emphasized in accounts of interactions with advanced extraterrestrial beings. The Confederation's approach of offering guidance instead of direct teaching reflects a philosophy that emphasizes self-discovery and inner understanding as essential for genuine spiritual growth.
They introduce this concept of the original thought, which they also call love. It's a profound state of unity where everyone is seen as part of the Creator. Hatan explains that their monitoring of our thoughts isn't an invasion of privacy, but rather a way of perceiving the Creator's thoughts. They believe all thought originates from the Creator, whose infinite parts all have free will. The Confederation's goal, they say, is to bring these ideas of unity and love to those parts of creation that have become isolated, those who've lost touch with this core understanding. They encourage you, the listener, to remember these concepts, especially when things get tough. The idea that there's an underlying unity to everything is incredibly powerful and potentially life-changing.
This concept of the original thought as the foundation of love and interconnectedness is at the heart of the law of one philosophy. Hayton's perspective on thought, even negative thoughts, originating from the Creator, offers a radical view of unity and the all-encompassing nature of free will. The Confederation's mission to help isolated parts of creation shows a motivation rooted in this understanding of oneness and the desire to bring everyone back to this awareness.
They address the skepticism that many might have about the practicality and idealism of these concepts, and the idea that advanced beings would even care enough to help us. Hayton suggests that humanity often misses the big picture, focusing too much on technology and not enough on the Creator's plan for perfection. The solution they propose is meditation. Quieting the conscious mind allows us to reconnect with a deeper appreciation for reality and that original thought of love and unity.
Addressing skepticism head-on is important for building trust with the audience. Hayton's response challenges our ideas of progress and value. Maybe spiritual understanding and connection to the Creator are more important than technological advancement. Meditation is presented as a key to shifting our focus and reconnecting with that deeper understanding of reality rooted in love and unity.
The Confederation often describes our everyday reality as an illusion. They say this illusion is created by desire and is meant to help us evolve quickly through the experiences we have within it. They emphasize the opportunities for growth that exist within this illusion and the importance of responding to our experiences with love, like Jesus did. The illusion, they say, is a teaching tool, and becoming aware of its lessons is key to our spiritual evolution.
The idea of our perceived reality being an illusion is a common theme in Eastern thought. The Confederation's perspective emphasizes that this illusion serves a purpose, to help us learn and grow. The challenges we face within this illusion are opportunities for us to develop compassion and understanding. Responding to everything with love, like Jesus, is presented as the most effective way to navigate and transcend the limitations of this illusory reality.
They explain that desire is the key to receiving in this illusion. It's all part of the Creator's plan for us to fulfill our desires. But then they acknowledge that we don't always get what we consciously want in this reality. They suggest that through meditation, we can understand our real desires on a deeper level. They encourage us to let go of the usual ideas of cause and effect, which are part of the illusion, and focus on becoming aware of the Creator. They emphasize that simply seeking intellectual knowledge won't lead us to the truth of love that underlies everything.
Desire as a driving force in the universe is a key metaphysical concept. The fact that we don't always get what we consciously desire suggests that there's a deeper level of desire operating, a level that's more spiritual and accessible through meditation, not just intellectual analysis. Moving beyond linear cause and effect and focusing on the Creator requires shifting from a purely material worldview to a more consciousness-based one.
The messages from the Confederation consistently highlight the importance of seeking and the power of desire, with free will being the foundation of everything. They say each of us is a unique part of one fundamental unity, and their top priority is to not interfere with free will, which shapes how they contact us. They won't force their truth on anyone, but they offer it freely for us to consider, accept, or reject. This process of choosing, they say, is crucial for our spiritual evolution. They explain why they have to stay hidden and communicate through channels to those who are seeking, allowing each person to assess the information and decide for themselves.
The Confederation's respect for free will is central to their philosophy. It's why they take this indirect, non-interventionist approach. Respecting our right to choose our own beliefs and paths is paramount. They rely on channeling because it allows them to share information with those who are seeking, without being coercive. It respects the individual's sovereignty and unique journey.
They point out that many contactee and channeling groups around the world are sharing similar messages and philosophies, emphasizing how basic and profoundly simple this cosmic philosophy is. They say understanding is a major goal, and it's achievable through meditation. The Confederation offers their understanding, stressing that it's not ultimate wisdom but based on their own experiences. They hope that by making contact, they can encourage people to look within. They express hope for wider contact in the future, despite the wide range of spiritual and evolutionary levels on Earth. They're committed to speaking through channels until enough people become aware of this basic message of love and unity.
The fact that similar messages are coming from various sources suggests a common thread, a set of universal principles resonating across different channels. The emphasis on simplicity and the accessibility of profound understanding through meditation makes this philosophy open to anyone, regardless of their intellectual background. The Confederation's humility in offering their perspective as a catalyst for inner seeking reinforces their non-dogmatic approach. They're not dictating truth, they're encouraging individual exploration.
Again, they emphasize that meditation is the best way to directly understand the infinite Creator's love. They explain that meditation becomes increasingly meaningful as you progress spiritually, evolving from a simple technique to a way of life. People who meditate regularly often experience a more peaceful and positive state of mind. Other benefits of meditation and spiritual seeking include the realization that service to others is service to yourself, stemming from the understanding that we're all interconnected.
Meditation is consistently presented as the core practice for spiritual growth and experiencing the truth of the law of one firsthand. The benefits go beyond relaxation and affect our perception, leading to a deeper awareness of interconnectedness and a natural inclination toward compassion and service.
They stress the importance of preparing yourself internally for service to others, and they say that meditation is the best way to do that. This inner work, they suggest, ultimately leads to the answers to all our big questions, answers that often boil down to a simple yet profound concept that can be experienced in the stillness of meditation. They encourage us to learn from those who are already actively serving others. The Confederation also expresses appreciation for vocal channels trained in groups like the one in Louisville, which has been going since '62. They acknowledge that their message isn't unique, but serves those seeking outside of traditional religion and philosophy. They also note the need for more skilled channels who are dedicated to daily meditation and genuinely desire contact.
The emphasis on taking responsibility for our own spiritual development through meditation is consistent. They present vocal channeling as a valuable form of service, providing a conduit for information. The call for more dedicated channels highlights the need for individuals willing to commit to this service through practice and sincere intention.
They offer a personal suggestion. When you meditate on your own, don't focus on trying to contact the Confederation directly. That's best done in groups with experienced receivers. For individual meditation, they recommend using tuning methods to enhance your meditative state, things like reciting the Lord's Prayer, chanting, reading inspirational material, and visualizing white light for protection and focus. Reincarnation is once again emphasized as a fundamental part of the Confederation's message. They say that through meditation and seeking, you can break through that forgetting that happens at birth and become more aware of the lessons you're here to learn, which always relate to loving more effectively. They stress that we all have unique lessons. They also suggest that recurring problems in our lives often point to a core lesson we need to learn. When we face these challenges, they advise us to stop overthinking and try to understand the lesson intuitively.
This is practical guidance for those who want to explore these ideas and deepen their spiritual practice. The distinction between individual and group meditation for contact is helpful. The focus on reincarnation and identifying our personal learning goals highlights the individuality of the spiritual path. The advice to move beyond analysis when facing persistent challenges encourages us to tap into our intuition and access deeper levels of awareness through meditation.
They acknowledge that staying in a constant state of meditation is tough in everyday life. So they recommend formal meditation sessions and then cultivating a semi-meditative state of awareness throughout the day. This can help prevent destructive impulses and unconscious patterns from holding us back. The foundation for all these lessons of love and growth is the concept of unity, understanding that everything is interconnected and ultimately one. They encourage us to meditate on this unity all the time, especially when things are tough, because changes we make in our spiritual selves, driven by love, will ultimately affect our experience in this physical illusion. They suggest that channeled voices, like those of Ra and Haton, are expressions of the Creator's voice operating at different levels of awareness within this unified consciousness. Focusing on the Creator's unity, they say, can help create inner peace and harmony.
It's compassionate of them to acknowledge how hard it is to always be in a meditative state. They reiterate that unity is the foundational principle, and meditating on this interconnectedness, especially during difficult times, is a powerful tool for transforming ourselves and easing suffering. The idea that channeled communications are different expressions of the Creator emphasizes the source of all being and the potential for accessing wisdom through these channels.
They then touch on the idea that we might be in the last days,